welcome to the Badass Breastfeeding Podcast. This is Dianne, your lactation consultant.
And I'm Abby, the Badass Breastfeeder, and today's episode is brought to you by the Motif Luna Breast Pump. The Motif Luna Breast Pump is covered by insurance and proven to provide more milk in less time. We will hear more from our sponsor later, but you can head to badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com and check out our sponsor page. See if you can give them any of your business because they make this podcast possible. And while you're there, scroll down, enter your email address, and we'll send these episodes straight to your inbox every time there's a new one. And you can check out our merch page, our shop page that has our merchandise on it. And we are on Patreon. And oh my God, it just keeps getting more and more fun. We had a Zoom hangout yesterday and it was really fun. There was a whole bunch of people there and it was so fun. And I guess it wasn't yesterday because this episode is not live. We're not live.
We think we are. Right.
Yeah. But please join us there. We have our Zoom hangouts. We have our exclusive content over there. Mini podcasts, extra episodes, ad free. We have God, I don't know. We have lots
Revolution
of things.
Parenting.
Revolution Parenting episodes are coming out there. And you can look for the link to check out the different options right at the top of whatever you're listening at the show notes. Just scroll down. There should be a link right there. There will be a link right there. I promise. I'll put it there. And we're still hosting our giveaway for people who leave reviews around the internet. We get emails all the time. People are doing it. So if you're thinking about doing it and you're like, I don't know if I should, you should, because people are doing it and they're getting their goodie bags. So send a screenshot and your address over to badassbreastfeedingpodcast@gmail.com and you'll get a goodie bag. And we will be in Detroit. The countdown is on. It's just like a week and a half away now. Mm-hmm. Or whatever it is. It's May 7th. And we will be in Detroit. So if you're in the area, please come and see us at our table and hang out with us. We'll be there just hanging out.
Giving stuff away.
Yeah, we're going to give stuff away. Including candy. My Aunt Diane bought some candy.
I did buy candy. Yes. And thankfully, it's a kind my son does not like. So he won't eat it all before we get there.
I would have to buy candy the morning of because I would just eat it.
We hid it.
You can't hide it from yourself.
No, that's true. I can't hide it. I still have Easter candy.
But you have more self-control than I do, apparently.
Not much.
All right. Diane has our review of the week.
It says, I love your show. It has been so helpful to me as I navigate going back to work and pumping. Although I have 3 kids, I was only able to breastfeed for about 6 months with the other 2. And through your podcast, I've learned so many tips and tricks that I think will allow me to just breastfeed for at least a year. I just want to make one comment. I loved your episode about going back to work. I'm a physician and I often have times that I have to go 6 hours without pumping due to my busy schedule. But I find that as long as I pump the same amount of times each day, so like if the baby eats 5 meals, then I just pump 5 times per day and breastfeed in the morning and night, then I still make enough milk. Is this okay? I also had another question. I'm going on a trip in a few weeks. I hope we didn't miss this. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed. No. And we'll be away from the baby for 3 days. I'm not sure I will have enough milk just because I make just enough. I also don't want to really increase my supply so much. Any suggestions for how to tackle this? Thanks again for all your helpful information. And I thought this would be perfect for today because we are
absolutely perfect.
Yeah, because we're talking about balancing breastfeeding and pumping and all that stuff. So when she says, if the baby eats 5 meals, I just pump 5 times a day. Is that okay? That's absolutely okay. That's absolutely okay. And then going away, you can kind of do the same thing. If the baby eats 8 times a day, then pump 8 times in that day.
Oh, that's a lot of pumping. 5 times during a work day?
Well, she probably works 12 to 18 hours or something. She's a physician.
Yeah, so right. Oh, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah. So she probably works long hours.
Yeah.
But
yeah, that works.
But yeah, that totally works. And so we're going to talk a lot about this today, obviously. But basically, there's no wrong, there's no, if it's working for you, there is no wrong. And in this review, she did say, that she didn't want to cause an oversupply. She didn't want to really increase her supply. So she didn't want to overpump. And I don't blame you for that because that's a mess anyway. And sometimes it can, if you are pumping way too much, that can cause an oversupply issue as well.
Right. Yeah.
And I don't remember if did this episode come from anything, or did we just want to do it?
No, yeah, I think we just wanted to do it.
Yeah.
Because, the question comes up quite often. People are like, well, what do I do? I'm going back to work. I want to pump, but I also want to breastfeed.
Mm-hmm.
And, can I pump and then breastfeed when I see my baby? Or do I have to just pump? Or, it's like nobody tells anybody about how to do both. Because there are so many different ways. Yeah. Because there's so many different ways.
There's so many different ways to do it. And it's really individual. So like when I would do, when I had my office, I used to see people for I used to do like a return to work class, like in quotes. And people would get maybe only just a couple of people at a time that would come to class, which would be fine because it's like, okay, now we can do your individual situations, because it is very individual, and you would get 3 people and all 3 are having a whole totally different scenario. And they want to know, what do I do for my specific scenario? So it's really hard. So I'm sure anybody that's listening here today, we might not have very specific answers for you, but we can kind of give you some guidelines and stuff like that, because your situation is going to be very different from everybody else's too.
Yeah. And one of the ways, though, some things that might really cross over really well are how to maximize that breastfeeding time together. Because there's ways that you can mess it up. Yeah. And then there's ways that you can really try to maximize, which, goes into a little bit about the whole managing daycare thing. And you want to create a situation where when you guys are together, your baby wants to nurse and can nurse, fairly on demand.
Mm-hmm.
But if the baby, if you're pumping and all of that, that's fine. The pumping's not going to mess anything up. But picking up a baby that's just been fed from daycare, then you get home and you're like, oh God, we can nurse now. We're gonna have our cuddle time, and the baby's like, what? I'm full.
I know. That's why we always say, if you're picking up your baby, for example, at 5 p.m. or somebody's picking up your baby at 5 p.m., don't feed them past 3, because that way you can feed your baby as soon as you get them home, or, whatever.
Yeah.
But one of the biggest questions that I get is when people first have their baby and they're not even pumping yet. And they say, well, how does it work? How do I know when to pump? When do I pump?
Yeah.
If I'm breastfeeding 12 times a day, how does that work out? How do I start even building a stash? How do I start putting milk in the freezer because the baby's feeding
just
all the time?
Yeah.
Yeah. How do I do that?
Weird. I remember that early on too, when I was pumping, because I just thought that was part of breastfeeding, was that you just pump.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was nursing and then pumping afterwards, but then the baby was crying and I'm sitting here watching a crying baby so that I can pump. It didn't make any sense.
Yeah. Yeah. That's hard.
It does make sense if you need to put milk in the freezer.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to make time for that.
Yeah. So
but
what
it's hard
I find,
because they're constantly nursing and they want to nurse. And when they're not nursing, they're fussy because they want to nurse.
And they're just want to be held all the time. So that is really hard. So first of all, I always tell people, if your baby's feeding fine, do not pump for the first couple of weeks, right? We don't want to cause an oversupply, because if your baby is feeding 12 times a day as a newborn, brand newborn, they're just born, and the first 2 weeks of their life, they're feeding, 12 times a day or whatever it is, they're feeding all the time. If you're also pumping on top of that, you're telling your body you need milk for 2 babies. And this is a time period, these first 2 weeks, that's the time period where your body's kind of regulating things. So if you're pumping and breastfeeding during that time, then you're just going to make way too much milk. And that's not a good thing. People think it's a good thing. It's really difficult.
It's not the gift that it looks like.
No.
It's not. You're gonna be miserable.
So definitely, I know a lot of people say, I want my partner to help feed or, whatever, and that will happen, but we have to give it a few weeks. And that is a really important piece of this. We have to give it a few weeks. So after the first couple of weeks, usually it's okay to implement a pumping if you want to. Now, with the invention of these milk catchers, like Fairhaven has, the Milky's Milk Saver, that those kinds of things will, save milk for you without even having to pump. So sometimes that's all you need to do is just do that. And now you've got a little bit of milk saved, which, is nice. And then if you want your partner to give a bottle, say your partner wants to give a bottle at 6 p.m., you have to pump if you miss a feeding. So now you're going to pick up that rotation of pumping when you miss a feed. If you don't have milk from a milk saver, then usually what I tell people is that first feeding of the day, like 6, 7 a.m., your baby eats. Usually you're more full because your prolactin levels, which are highest overnight, that will make you more full in the morning. Plus your baby's probably going maybe a little bit, maybe a 3-hour or 4-hour stretch overnight, a little bit longer than during the daytime. At least a lot of babies, some babies do. And then you're more full because of the prolactin, because of your hormones. So that first feeding of the day, if you can pump right after that feeding, that's usually a great start to kind of get your stash started. But again, if you miss a feeding, if your partner gives a bottle and you miss a feeding, you have to pump. You have to pump that feeding. You're going to get full and uncomfortable, and we need your body to still know that we need to make milk at that time. So that's a really important thing to remember, when you're planning this out too. Because sometimes people say, well, I want my partner to give a bottle overnight. Or the partners will say, I want to give a bottle overnight so that she can sleep a little bit longer.
Uh-huh. No, you don't get to sleep. Not right now.
Sorry. And some people are really kind of I really want, that's what I really want. And if that's what you really want, if you want your partner to give that bottle overnight, you still have to get up and pump, which overall would probably be less time than getting up, changing the baby, feeding the bottle, getting them all wrapped up, getting them back to sleep. Just get up, pump for 10 minutes, go back to sleep. If that's really what you want to do, but you can't skip it.
Yeah, you don't even, and honestly, you don't have to get up. Have it next to your bed.
Right. Yeah.
Just have it right there. Have that's another thing about pumping, not to go off track, but I mean having things set up so that it's convenient, because pumping is such a pain.
Mm-hmm.
Having a little station next to the bed, if that's where you're pumping, having a station in the living room, set, things at work that are just going to make it run smoothly. If you have to double up on parts, double up on whatever, just so that they're in the different locations where you're going to pump.
Yeah. Have a little cooler next to the bed so you don't need to be running milk downstairs if you live in a, upstairs, downstairs kind of setup.
Get out of your warm covers.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then just, put it away in the morning. Yeah. We know that milk will be fine. Put it in a cooler.
Yep.
And it's fine for, until the morning time. Yeah. So those are things that you can do. And then, like I said, first thing in the morning is a great time if you want to kind of start that stash, start doing that, or start, getting milk set up away. If you are, depending on when you're going back to work, you can start increasing that pumping during the daytime if you want to. One of the important things to remember is that the more stimulation to your body via pumping or feeding is going to create more milk, right? We know that, right? It's all about the stimulation.
Yeah.
But for some reason, when people pump, they think there's no milk left for the baby. And if the baby wants to eat, they can't feed the baby.
Right.
And I hear that all the time. People say, well, I pumped and then the baby woke up and wanted to eat, so I had to give him the bottle I just pumped. No, plop that baby right on. First of all, we know pumping does not take all the milk out. It doesn't. Pumping does not drain your breast. You might not have more milk coming out, but that doesn't mean you're out of milk. It just means the pump can't get any more out.
Yeah, your pump will never get as much milk out as your baby.
No, your baby's much better. So you can still feed your baby. It's totally fine. Still feed your baby. And all it's doing is creating more milk. We know that it's more stimulation. So it's totally okay. And sometimes people say, well, I really felt like there was no milk there and the baby was fussy. And it's like, sometimes I think that's our brain just playing tricks on us.
It's just because we don't understand how it works.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, well, I pumped it all out. So obviously there's nothing in there. We don't understand that that's not possible. Now, when I had Exley, I was still nursing Jack, and Jack was nursing all the time. And he, I was like, hey, we're going to tandem nurse. Yeah, 2 boobs, 2 babies, free for all. And Exley wasn't gaining weight. And my lactation consultant was like, well, how is this working? Like, what are you doing? And I was like, whatever. Just, she's like, well, make sure that the baby's getting like the full side, because Jack nursing could really get a lot of milk out.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I'm putting Exley on, who's ready to have a full breast of milk, and there's not a full breast of milk. But that's because Jack is a human whose mouth was designed to get all of that milk out. Your pump is not.
No.
Your pump never will.
And the pumps now are amazing. They really are.
Yeah,
but
they're great.
they can't manipulate your milk ducts the way a baby can. So it's just,
Yeah, they're still
they
great
can only
for
do
what you
so
need
much.
them for. Right,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, they're just a machine. They can only do so much. But I always tell people, like, if you are, if your baby's napping and you want to pump, go ahead. If your baby only fed on one breast and didn't feed on both sides, or maybe only fed for a couple minutes on the second side, and you want to pump the rest just to save the milk, you can do that. Like, it depends on what you have time to do as well. If if somebody's giving a bottle, always pump so that you're not missing. So it's like there are ways to balance it depending on what your situation is. And we haven't even gotten to the work piece yet. But maybe we should do that. Why don't we take a break, and then we'll talk about what happens as you're gravitating into balancing with other things.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, we'll be right back. Today's episode is brought to you by Motif Medical. Are you in search of the perfect pump for your breastfeeding days? The Motif Luna breast pump is covered by insurance and proven to provide more milk in less time. The Motif Luna is lightweight, sleek, quiet, and customizable, so you can quickly find what works best for you and your baby. The Luna also features a backlit LCD screen, built-in nightlight, closed system, quiet motor, and auto shutoff. And the battery-powered model gives you even more freedom and flexibility with a rechargeable battery that lasts over 2 hours. In a third-party study, 5 out of 6 moms reported more milk in less time than the leading pump brands. The expression mode works to express milk from the breast as efficiently as possible, while the massage mode would stimulate letdown by mimicking baby's natural nursing pattern. Get ready to make your pumping days easier with the Motif Luna. Head to Motif Medical and use code BADASS for 15% off. That's Motif Medical, MOTIF medical.com, and use code BADASS for 15% off of your purchase. And today's sponsors and their promo codes can be found in the show notes under this episode from wherever you're listening from, and over at badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com. At badassbreastfeedingpodcast.com, you'll also find all of our other episodes and information about scheduling your very own one-on-one online lactation consultation with Dianne.
All right. So when you're at home and you're doing your pumping at home, now the other thing to remember too, that you don't need to pump for long periods of time. Some pumps have the turn off switch, the automatic shut off and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean you have to pump that whole time. You can pump, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever it is that you want to do, whatever is going to help you to balance it in your life. You don't have to stay attached to a pump for 30 minutes at a time if that's not working for you. I have also heard people say, experts in the field, say that you should only pump what your baby eats. So instead of pumping 5 ounces and your baby's only taking a 2-ounce bottle, only pump 2 ounces. Like I said, that's something that some experts in the field have suggested to decrease the possibility of an oversupply. That's, take that information and do what you will with it, because a lot of people like to pump as much milk as they possibly can. It's kind of I don't know. It's like the whole psychological thing, I feel like, too. Like, just people are just like, want to see that milk, want to see that stash growing and growing and growing.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like I would too. I would also just want to get like what the pump can get out. Just might as well just get it out. Unless you don't unless you're like, I only got 10 minutes for this break, so I can only pump for, 7 minutes. And then, okay, that's fine. But if you have like a lunch break, that's an hour-long lunch break, I would probably just pump until the flow slows down, and then
And for some people, the flow slows down, like they get everything that they're going to get in the first 10 minutes of pumping, which is totally fine. But if you're somebody who pumps longer, then whatever works. But what do you do when you go back to work? Like, how do you balance that with feeding? Like with feeding, and then you're pumping and you're trying to feed this baby when you're home, and you're trying to pump when you're not, and then you're trying to work the weekends. How does that work? Basically all you're doing is you're pumping, or you're breastfeeding your baby when you're home with your baby, and you're pumping when you're not. So that's totally, the only point of the pumping when you're at work is to keep your supply where we need it to be when you are with the baby, right? And to be able to give milk to your baby when you're not with your baby. So if your baby's getting 3 bottles while you're gone, then if you can pump 3 times, that's perfect. It doesn't have to be the exact time. Like if you're like, okay, they're giving my baby a bottle at 10 a.m., so I have to pump at 10. It doesn't have to be that exact. You can just know that, okay, I have to pump at some point in the morning. I have to make sure I get it in there some point in the morning.
Yeah.
Then you can, one time in the afternoon, one time usually like midday is perfect if you're working like an 8-hour shift. If you're not, if you're working longer than that and your baby's getting like how our review this morning, she was 5 times. She said, if the baby gets 5 bottles while I'm gone, I try to pump 5 times. That's perfect. You can, if you can get in the times where it doesn't have to be the exact time, as long as it's how many times your baby is going to be eating. That's really perfect. If you happen to be somebody that pumps more than what your baby needs, and you can get away with pumping twice instead because you're getting more milk, it all depends too. A lot of it depends on your comfort level. And some people, get full and uncomfortable, and you have to pump that milk during the daytime because you're not going to be comfortable. But people say well, can I get away with doing this? And it's like, well, technically, sure. But if you're uncomfortable, then you're going to have to pump. Kind of, that's kind of that's your body telling you it's time to feed our baby now. So sometimes there's not really a lot you can do about that. You're just going to have to pump a little bit to get that milk out. Yeah. And then once you're back with your baby, then, you're feeding your baby. And then on the days that you're not working, just feed your baby like you normally would. If you need to put in some pumping, a lot of times people say I don't pump on the weekends, or I don't pump when I'm not working. I only pump on the days that I'm working. That's fine. If that were that's totally fine. Sometimes I'll have people that are really struggling to keep up with supply. So we will kind of implement some pumping on the weekends or pumping when you're home. Hopefully that's, not something that you're going to have to do. And you can just leave pumping for when you're not home. And that would be ideal, right?
Yes, that would be ideal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's the ideal thing.
Feeding as much as you can in the morning before you leave.
Yeah, because definitely feed in the morning before you leave.
Yeah, the baby feeding as frequently as possible is going to be the best way to keep that supply up. Of course, you have to do, but maximizing that breastfeeding when you're together and through the night. That's the other thing is people don't want, they're like, I got to go back to work. I don't want to nurse through the night. But that's going to be, whether you're working or not, that's going to be the time where they can really help establish a healthy milk supply.
And you have to remember too, once you return to work, and we've got lots of episodes on going back to work, but your baby is where's my mom? Like, that's the time that they spend with their mom now. That's when they want their parent. Like, they're missing that time with you during the day, and they kind of tend to like reverse a little bit. Some babies, not all, but some babies will do that. And sometimes I'll have people tell me like, oh, my baby's sleeping through the night before I went back to work. And then I returned to work and they stopped sleeping. And it's like, well, yeah, because this is the time that now that they get to spend with you. And as much as you might be like, I love you and everything, but we all need to get some sleep because mama's got to work in the morning. But sometimes babies don't care about that. Unfortunately.
No, they have no idea. They don't care.
Yeah. They do not care. Get help as much as you possibly can, like from your partner or whatever, because, pumping. And if you listened to our episode a few weeks ago about pumping stories, one of the biggest things that came out of that was all of the cleaning that goes along with it. And that is a real thing. I had somebody ask me about that the other day. I did a prenatal with a couple and they were like, so do we have to sterilize everything every time? And I'm like, I'm not really like all about making extra work. I would say that's a lot to sterilize all the parts every single time you use them.
Yeah.
That is not necessary. But, you do have to clean stuff. So having people that are in your house helping you with all of this as well can help balance out some of this work too. Because it's a lot to do. So maybe you have, like Abby said, have extra parts, have extra things. See if your insurance will cover it. Sometimes insurance will cover all that stuff. The websites have it. If you have a Motif pump, go on their website with our coupon code, get extra parts. Like, there's definitely a way to do, to get those extra parts and make it manageable. But that will help save you a lot of work if you have extra pumps or extra parts to your pump. If you are, if you're working all day and you're dealing with all this at work, then kind of have that agreement with your partner that, at home, they clean everything at home for you. You're doing everything at work. So have them do everything for you at home. It's not just the pump parts, it's the bottles and everything too that go with feeding your baby express breast milk. So that can be a little bit, we don't think about that stuff when we talk about like, how do we balance the pumping with the breastfeeding? That stuff has to be balanced out as well because it does add a lot of work to your plate too.
Yeah, it's so time consuming.
It is.
Take all the shortcuts that you can.
It really is. And a lot of people will ask about like, can I just put, I read that I can put my pump parts in the refrigerator. Like when I'm at work, I don't have to clean everything. Is that true? If your baby is a healthy full-term baby, I always say that I don't see a problem with that. Some people get really concerned that there's going to be bacteria buildup and stuff like that with it. There's those cool sterilizing bags. You can use those if you want to.
Microwave bags?
Yeah, those microwave bags.
Really good. Yeah, those are really handy when we were doing this nonsense of pumping and all of that.
Oh, did you use them?
Yes. Yeah. They're so handy. Because it's just like, you just throw your stuff in there and then microwave it and it's done.
It was like you put like 2 ounces of water or something in there too. It doesn't like sterilize it.
Yeah, you have to put you put a little water in it and then you Ziploc it. And then you put it in the microwave and then it comes out mother freaking hot. And then be careful. And then it's clean. And then you can just like dump it out onto a towel or like, I don't know, just like leave it on the counter. It was a lot easier than like boiling a pot of water. Like, I don't know. I know that this is ridiculous, but boiling a pot of water like seems so old fashioned to me. It's like, get a pot of like she's going into labor at home. Oh my God, get a pot of boiling water, which I still don't understand what that was for.
I know. Well, probably just to sterilize. I don't know. They did it on Little House on the Prairie. I don't even know.
I know. So whenever I hear boil a pot of water, I'm like, oh my God, what is this? The 1800s? So I'm like, yes. Like if you could do those Ziploc bags, man, those are really good. And you can use them like a bunch of times.
I was just going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yep. You can use them over and over again. And then they start to get kind of crummy and then you get a new one. But I don't remember No, man, you can just use them over and over again.
Yeah, I thought it was like 20 times or something.
Yeah,
like
something
that
is
was
a
a
lot.
lot. Yeah.
No, I remember really liking that.
Yeah. So that's even something like you can do at work. Like if there's a microwave at work, you could take 30 seconds. Because how long does it go in the microwave for? Like 30
Yeah,
seconds or a
something like
minute or
30
something?
seconds or something.
Yeah.
Not long at all.
It's not very long. And then you could even do that at work and have everything, just like sterilized or whatever. Or at least once, before you go home. It is like trying to, like Abby said, take all the shortcuts that you possibly can, because balancing all this stuff out can feel a little bit overwhelming. Some people have 2 pumps. I'm not saying that's something that you have to do, but some people do. Maybe they have a pump that their friend gave them. Sometimes people will be like, well, yeah, my cousin didn't use her pump, so she gave it to me, or she only used it a couple of times and, whatever, didn't need it, didn't go back to work and, decided she didn't need her pump. So she gave it to me. Great. Did you get one through insurance? No, I just have the one that my cousin gave me. I would still get that insurance pump.
I was just going to say, if you have a pump right now and you didn't get it through your insurance, call your insurance and get a pump, any pump.
Just get an extra.
Yes. And if you don't need it, fine, then pass it on to somebody. If it's a closed system pump, you can just pass that on to someone else.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if they just used it a few times. They could have used it 1,000 times. If it's a closed system pump, it's clean and you can pass it on and they can just replace the parts, little tubing and the valves and stuff.
Yep.
And then you can use it. I mean, use those things until they
die.
Putter out. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure.
And definitely get one through your insurance, because you can even like our sponsor today, Motif, you can, they'll help you like apply through your insurance.
Yeah.
And just get one.
And that way you have one at home and one at work, and you don't have to worry about screwing around with it, or have one upstairs and one downstairs if you have an up and down house.
And honest to God, get whatever you can free from this government. And if you're not going to use it, bring it to a local shelter. Bring it to, I don't know, a WIC office, or bring it somewhere and just be like, I don't need this, but I have it. It's like all those free COVID tests, remember?
Yeah.
It's like all those free COVID tests, and people are like, oh, I don't need any more. And it's like, no, they're free from the government. Get them. And if you don't need them, give them to someone else.
Put it on Facebook Marketplace. Like somebody could use it. Maybe somebody's looking for an extra,
or give it to people who can't afford it. Because there's all kinds of people walking around who just can't, who like don't even have insurance.
Yeah.
Or, who are trying to make it through their day and they don't have a pump, can't afford a pump, and have to go to work and have a baby, and find them.
Yeah. So it's totally, definitely get the insurance pump for sure. Have 2 different kinds if you want to. Like if it's something that you can do, if it's an option for you, then great. If not, if you have one pump, just get more parts if you can, because that will make things a lot easier for you as well. Trying to think of like what else can really help with balancing breast. I think the most important things to remember are that you're not taking milk away from your baby when you pump. There's always milk left behind. There's always more milk in the breast. You're not taking milk away from your baby. If you are trying to, save up a stash and you pump at home while you're balancing that breastfeeding with the pumping at home before you go back to work, or maybe you're not even going back to work, you just want a stash, you can pump. You can pump. It's okay. You're not going to take milk away from your baby. If you have time to pump and you want to, I saw Mom last week with twins and she's like, should I pump? And I'm like, do you have time to pump? Is this something that you have time to do? Because sometimes you just don't have that kind of time. Sometimes you are, like Abby said, you're just holding a baby all the time. And pumping is like a very distant, kind of thought. If somebody is there with you, then use that time. Like if you have help at home, if you are somebody that is lucky enough to have help, a partner that didn't have to go back to work right away, or, a family member that's coming over to help you, then that's your time. That's the time to maximize that pumping or whatever that you want to do, because somebody is there with you to help with the baby. Or if your, partner comes home after work, You're like, hey, I want to pump once tonight. Make sure you're holding the baby or whatever. Make it, it doesn't matter what time it is like my point. It doesn't have to be a specific time. It can be when it works for you. There's really no wrong answer at all. Just make it so it works for you without it feeling overwhelming, if that's possible. That's really the best thing to do. And make sure you're getting help, because don't feel bad about asking your partner to clean some bottles. That's totally okay to do.
No way. Yeah. And when you're together, nurse as much as you can.
Mm-hmm. Nurse as much as you can. Absolutely. Let that baby nurse as much as they want to when you're together. And that's it.
Well, thank you so much for listening.
Thank you. Bye.